Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to open with two acknowledgements. I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Cadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present, as well as extending those respects to any Aboriginal people with us today. I also wanted to acknowledge all the very special guests here today. There are so many dignitaries, it's impossible to name you all, but thank you all for being here. You're in for a real treat. I've had the opportunity, for those who haven't had the opportunity to go to a Great Eastern Ranges Initiative Forum in the past, you're in for something very, very special, and it's my only lament that I can't stay for the remainder of the day to enjoy it, because it's a terrific initiative and it will be a terrific program and a terrific day for you. I'm going to go off-piste in terms of my comments. My staff always get nervous when I do this, but I've learnt that you don't know quite how long you've got in politics, so you may as well use it to say something. And what I wanted to say was, Aldo Leopold once said that the goal of conservation is to create a state of harmony between man and nature. And the sad thing is, when we look at contemporary debates, this is something I was having a brief chat with David Butcher about outside, when we look at contemporary debates about, you pick the environmental issue, it doesn't really matter what it is at the moment, the debates are violently polarised. Native vegetation is obviously one that is particularly acute with recent events in New South Wales. But it extends to marine environments, to forests, to energy policy. You think of the environmental issues and debates that you're concerned about, and it seems that the debates are at a particular point of acute polarisation at the moment. And that is a cultural problem right across our nation, and something that we all have to do something to address, because while we're polarised, while we're speaking even different languages, we don't even understand each other on these issues, we're not going to be able to resolve them. So we've got to create venues for conversation, for respectful and rational and reasoned debate about these issues if we are going to be able to determine solutions. And that is what is so exciting about the Great Eastern Ranges Initiative. And I think perhaps why it's captured so much, not just popular and public support, but so much institutional support from 5 governments across Eastern Australia. It's because also, I think it was Goethe who once said, "Dream no small dreams, because they have no power to capture the imagination of men." And he meant women too, but he was writing a long time ago. But that's what's exciting about the Great Eastern Ranges Initiative. It's a big dream. Not only does it cover 3,600 kilometres from the Grampians to Cape York, not only does it have a horizon of decades and decades and decades, it's a big dream, it's a big vision, and as such it can capture public imagination and public attention. And that's been the case with large landscape conservation ever since it was sort of really developed from the 1990s. And you see that in other jurisdictions. We're about to hear from Harvey Locke and the Yellowstone to Yukon initiative. It's a big vision, and it captures imagination, and that's what's exciting, because it creates a venue for community, a venue for conversation, and it's something that brings people together in environmental policy at the moment that is so polarised. So that's what's exciting. It's a landscape-based approach that people can agree on, and it's tangible, people can see it, and people can believe in it. And in their small ways, in their different disparate communities, people can do something about a wider vision that's shared right across the nation. It involves a deep understanding of landscape, not just at a shallow sort of aesthetic landscape high-level approach, but also at a granular approach, looking at the protection of biodiversity and clean air and clean water. So it's big and it's small all at the same time. So it's a very, very exciting vision. And one of the things that I find amazingly empowering and exciting about the initiative is that it is about people as much as it is about other elements of biodiversity. It's about human communities and human interactions with the landscape. and so it doesn't seek to separate people out from nature, but it treats us as we are, which is part of the landscape ourselves and part of nature ourselves. So it's a deeply human initiative, and that's, I think, one of the other reasons it's been able to capture so much public support and public attention and institutional support and attention as well. It, in that case, in that respect, is as much cultural as it is natural, and it's helping to bridge a deep cultural divide in understanding about the importance of the environment and the ecosystem services it provides to us. It's not as if environmental concerns can somehow be separated from economic or social concerns. They're all part of the same argument, all part of the same narrative, and without a healthy biodiversity, the other aspirations that people and communities might have will never be appropriately realised. One thing that I find exciting as a vision statement in relation to the Great Eastern Ranges Initiative as well is it's like, if you like, an Australian iteration of the Green Belt that is one of the shibboleths of British politics. It doesn't matter which side of politics you're on in the UK, you support the Green Belt. It's become such an important part of the political firmament in the UK that it's just a given. And so this green corridor idea, but a natural green corridor, has the same power to capture that cross-party support and that cross-cultural support, which the Green Belt movement has done in the UK now successfully for more than 100 years. So it's that transformative in its scope and its potential. That's why the New South Wales Government has been very pleased and privileged to contribute $11 million of taxpayers' funds towards the realisation of this initiative. And that's a relationship that I hope is ongoing, because it's going to need to be ongoing, because this vision is going to last for many decades to come. And certainly in my role as Environment Minister, I'm deeply passionate about this project. I think it's a terrific initiative, and I think governments should be doing everything we can to support it. It's also consistent with so many programs that we have running within the environment portfolio and other portfolios in the New South Wales Government, and that's another reason it's sort of it fits in synergistically with other things we're trying to do in relation to our national parks acquisition process, which is all about securing connectivity and connecting our reserved lands. And so the Great Eastern Ranges Initiative is entirely consistent with that approach. It's also consistent with our Save Our Species program, and certainly part of which is to reintroduce up to 8 species that have been locally extinct in New South Wales for more than 100 years. Species like the numbat and the bilby, which are proposed to be reintroduced in special sanctuary zones within our parks estate. Again, the initiative is entirely consistent with that rewilding approach that the New South Wales Government is looking at. It also builds, across New South Wales, about 9% of the state is contained within reserved lands, and about 2.5% of which is declared wilderness. But of course, none of these parks, park just comes from the Latin word for fence. All it does, and certainly nature doesn't respect park boundaries, nor do weeds, nor do pests, nor does fire. We need to ensure that our management, if we're going to effectively manage reserved lands, we have to be cognizant of appropriate sort of tenure-blind management across reserved lands and across privately owned lands or lands owned by different tenures right across the landscape. And that's another thing that the Great Eastern Ranges Initiative is keen to do. Also, we're looking through our biodiversity offsets policy at the idea of conservation payments to farmers, which is another way of engaging the landholders with this imperative, this wider social and economic imperative of proper land conservation and providing a real economic benefit to that social and political and economic objective. And it's what else do I want to say? I suppose one of the really also exciting things about the initiative is that it inspires change in the way that nature is understood. One of my favourite quotations is by the Oxford Don C.S. Lewis, who once said that the domination of man over nature is not so much the domination of man over nature, but the domination of some men over other men, using nature as the instrument. This gets around that war, that sense of war, that somehow I mean, I've never understood the expression of things being locked up in national parks. To me, land's locked up from my use if I don't own it. National parks everyone owns, so I think it's actually the opposite of locking things up. But we need to have this tenure-blind approach to ensure that we get proper conservation outcomes right across our parks estate and right across our other lands. Because again, all these things are necessary if we're going to have a healthy economy, if we're going to have a healthy society and healthy communities as well. So it's moving us, the initiative is moving us from this conception of a battle that somehow has sort of percolated, that somehow there's a battle between conservationists and communities. Instead, it's conservationists working within and as part of communities. It's moving us away from a war footing towards a footing of working together, which is ultimately what we need to do if we're going to achieve good conservation outcomes. Because if we continue to persist with a narrative of conflict, we're actually never going to get anywhere. And so that's what's so exciting about this initiative, and that's why I'm so disappointed I won't be able to stay for the rest of the day. But thank you for all your works. I know there's up to 200 different groups represented here today. Thank you for all the work you're doing in your communities. Thank you to all the public servants right across government, from the various governments involved. Thank you for your commitment and your genuine public service, because this is a great public service that you're engaged with. And thanks for having me.